I'm Sophia, 27 years old, and 8 months ago I won $47 million in the lottery. Instead of telling anyone, I decided to conduct the ultimate test of my family's character by pretending I was broke and asking each of them for help with a fake financial emergency. What I discovered about their true nature was so shocking that it completely changed who gets to benefit from my fortune and who gets cut off forever. The way some family members responded with incredible generosity while others showed pure greed will restore your faith in humanity and simultaneously break your heart. Before we dive into this incredible story about money revealing people's true character, I need your predictions. If you won millions but pretended to be broke, how do you think your family would respond? Would they help or make excuses? Drop your thoughts in the comments and hit that like button because this social experiment exposed family dynamics I never could have imagined. Subscribe because the way this all played out is absolutely mind-blowing, and the final reveals are going to shock you. The winning numbers were announced on a Tuesday night in March: 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, and Powerball 18. I was sitting in my tiny studio apartment, eating leftover pizza and checking my ticket more out of habit than hope, when I realized I was holding a piece of paper worth $47 million after taxes. The initial shock was so overwhelming that I actually thought I was misreading the numbers. I checked the lottery website 3 times, compared my ticket to the winning numbers obsessively, and even called the lottery hotline to confirm the results. It wasn't until the automated voice congratulated me on matching all 6 numbers that the reality began to sink in. My first instinct was to call everyone I knew, to scream the news to anyone who would listen, to share the incredible joy and disbelief with the people I loved most. I actually had my phone in my hand, ready to dial my sister's number, when something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of watching too many documentaries about lottery winners whose lives were destroyed by sudden wealth, or maybe it was some deeper intuition about my family dynamics that I had never fully acknowledged. But instead of making that call, I sat back down on my couch and really thought about what this windfall could reveal about the people in my life. I had always wondered how my family really felt about me beyond the obligatory love that comes with shared DNA. We were a middle-class family that had struggled through various financial ups and downs over the years, and money had always been a source of stress and tension in our relationships. My parents were hard-working people who had sacrificed to provide for their children, but they had also developed some complicated attitudes about money, success, and family obligations that I had never fully understood. My siblings and I had taken different paths in life, with varying degrees of financial success and stability. My older brother Marcus was a successful lawyer who lived comfortably but was always complaining about his expenses and the cost of maintaining his lifestyle. My younger sister Lily was a teacher who genuinely struggled with student loans and a modest salary but never complained about her financial situation. Extended family relationships were more complicated, involving aunts and uncles who had achieved different levels of success and cousins whose financial situations ranged from wealthy to barely getting by. Family gatherings often included subtle tension about money: who could afford to contribute what to group gifts, who was struggling with bills, who was doing better than they let on. I had always been somewhere in the middle of our family's economic spectrum. I worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm, made decent money but nothing spectacular, and lived modestly in a way that allowed me to save a little while enjoying occasional luxuries. My family saw me as responsible with money but not particularly ambitious about increasing my income. But now, sitting with a lottery ticket worth more money than my entire family had earned collectively over their lifetimes, I realized I had an unprecedented opportunity to learn who my family members really were beneath the surface of our ordinary relationships. The plan that formed in my mind over the following weeks was both simple and devious. Instead of revealing my lottery win, I would create a fake financial crisis and ask different family members for help. The amount I would request, the urgency of the situation, and the specific details would be carefully calibrated to test their character, generosity, and genuine care for my well-being. I spent hours researching how to claim my lottery prize anonymously, working with attorneys and financial advisors to ensure that my windfall could remain completely secret while I conducted my family experiment. The Lottery Commission was surprisingly accommodating about privacy concerns, and within a month I had claimed my prize through a trust that kept my name out of public records. But the money just sat in accounts while I prepared for what I privately called the Great Family Test. I developed detailed scenarios for different family members, crafted believable financial emergencies that would seem urgent but not so dramatic as to cause unnecessary panic, and prepared to document their responses in ways that would reveal their true priorities and values. The test wasn't motivated by cruelty or suspicion, it was driven by genuine curiosity about who my family members were when they thought no one was watching and when they had opportunities to demonstrate their character without expectation of reward or recognition. I had watched too many relationships change when money entered the equation, and I wanted to understand my family's real dynamics before introducing the complications that would inevitably come with revealing my lottery win. I needed to know who I could trust, who genuinely cared about my well-being, and who saw me as a person rather than a potential source of financial benefit. Over the next few months, I would discover answers to questions I hadn't even known I was asking, and the results would reshape every relationship in my life in ways I could never have anticipated. The logistics of conducting a fair and revealing family test required more planning than I had initially anticipated. I needed to create scenarios that would seem believable, urgent enough to motivate genuine responses, but not so dramatic as to cause unnecessary panic or trauma for my family members. After consulting with the financial advisor who was helping me manage my lottery winnings, I developed a comprehensive plan that would test different family members in ways that matched their personalities, financial situations, and historical relationships with money and family obligations. The core scenario I created was that I had been offered an incredible business opportunity, a chance to buy into a graphic design partnership that would significantly increase my income and career prospects. The investment required was $25,000, which I claimed to need within 30 days to secure the opportunity. The amount was substantial enough to be meaningful but not so large as to seem impossible for a family member to provide or co-sign. The beauty of this scenario was that it wasn't asking for charity or emergency assistance, it was asking for investment in my future success. This framing would reveal whether family members believed in my potential, trusted my judgment, and were willing to take financial risks to support my goals. But I also developed variations of the request that would be tailored to different family members' situations and personalities. For relatives who I knew couldn't provide $25,000 outright, I would ask for smaller amounts or requests for them to co-sign loans. For family members who were more financially comfortable, I might increase the requested amount to see how their generosity scaled with their ability to help. Most importantly, I established clear criteria for evaluating their responses. I wasn't just looking at who said yes or no, I was analyzing the speed of their response, the questions they asked, the concerns they raised, the conditions they attached to their help, and the overall tone of their communication. A family member who immediately said yes without asking questions might be wonderfully generous, or they might be financially reckless. A family member who asked detailed questions about the business opportunity might be appropriately cautious, or they might be looking for reasons to say no. A family member who offered a smaller amount than requested might be doing the best they could with limited resources, or they might be testing how desperate I really was. The test would also reveal information about family members' financial situations that I had never fully understood. Who was actually struggling more than they let on? Who was more comfortable than they appeared? Who managed money responsibly, and who made impulsive financial decisions? I started with my immediate family, parents and siblings, before moving on to aunts, uncles, and cousins. Each conversation was carefully planned and documented, and I gave myself specific timelines for each request to ensure fairness and consistency. My first call was to my parents, who I reached on a Sunday evening when they were typically relaxed and available for longer conversations. "Mom, Dad, I hope I'm not interrupting your dinner," I began, using the slightly anxious tone I had practiced to convey urgency without panic. "Not at all, sweetie," Mom replied. "What's going on? You sound a little stressed." "Well, I am a little stressed, actually. Something incredible has come up at work, and I need to ask for your advice and possibly your help." I explained the business partnership opportunity, emphasizing the potential career benefits and the tight timeline for making the investment. I detailed the research I had supposedly done about the other partners, the growth potential of the firm, and the specific reasons why this opportunity was perfect for my skills and career goals. The only problem, I concluded, is that I need to come up with $25,000 within the next month to secure my partnership stake. I've got about $10,000 in savings, but I'm $15,000 short of what I need. The silence on the other end of the phone was telling. I could hear my parents having a whispered conversation, and I could imagine them exchanging glances and calculating their own financial situation. Dad spoke first. "Sophia, that's a lot of money, and a very short timeline. Have you looked into business loans or other financing options?" "I've tried, but the banks want extensive business history and collateral that I don't have. The existing partners are willing to vouch for me, but they can't guarantee the loan themselves because they're already financially committed to the expansion." Mom's response was more emotional. "Honey, we want to help you succeed, but we need to be realistic about our own financial situation. Your father and I don't have $15,000 sitting in savings that we can just hand over." "I understand that, Mom. I wasn't necessarily asking you to give me the money outright. I was wondering if you might be willing to co-sign a loan, or maybe lend me part of the amount, or help me figure out some other creative solution." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, during which my parents asked detailed questions about the business opportunity, expressed concerns about the timeline and the risk, and ultimately promised to think about it and get back to me within a few days. Their response revealed several important things about their character and our relationship. They were cautious but not dismissive, concerned about the financial risk but not unsympathetic to my goals, and willing to consider helping but not eager to commit quickly to a large financial obligation. Most telling was their focus on practical questions rather than emotional support. They wanted to understand the business details and the financial implications, but they didn't express excitement about my potential success or confidence in my ability to make good decisions about my career. The second call was to my brother Marcus, who I reached at his law office on a Wednesday afternoon. Marcus's response to my request was immediate and telling in ways I hadn't expected. As soon as I finished explaining the business partnership opportunity and the $25,000 investment requirement, he launched into what sounded like a prepared lecture about financial responsibility and risk management. "Sophia, I have to be honest with you, this sounds exactly like the kind of opportunity that separates smart money from desperate money," he said, his lawyer voice in full effect. Partnership opportunities that require immediate cash investments and have tight timelines are classic red flags for potential fraud or misrepresentation. His skepticism wasn't entirely unreasonable, but the tone was condescending in a way that revealed his assumptions about my business judgment and financial sophistication. He spoke to me like I was a naive child who couldn't recognize an obvious scam, rather than a professional adult who had supposedly done research and due diligence. "Have you had these partners independently verified?" he continued. "Have you seen audited financial statements for the business? Have you consulted with a business attorney about the partnership agreement? Because if you haven't done those things, you're not ready to invest $25,000 of anyone's money." The questions were reasonable, but they came with an underlying assumption that I couldn't possibly have thought of such obvious considerations myself. Marcus was positioning himself as the smart, cautious family member who would save me from my own poor judgment, rather than as a supportive brother who might trust my professional abilities. "Marcus, I understand your concerns, and I have done research," I replied. "I'm not asking you to blindly hand over money for something I haven't investigated. I'm asking whether you'd be willing to help me pursue what seems like a legitimate and valuable opportunity for my career." "Sophia, even if this opportunity is legitimate, partnership investments are inherently risky. What happens if the business fails? What happens if the other partners don't perform as expected? What happens if market conditions change and the growth projections don't materialize?" His focus on worst-case scenarios was revealing. Instead of considering the potential benefits or expressing confidence in my ability to evaluate and manage risk, he was cataloging all the ways the investment could fail. His default assumption seemed to be that I was likely to make bad decisions and that protecting me from risk was more important than supporting my ambitions. I can't co-sign a loan for this kind of speculative investment, he concluded. And honestly, I don't think you should be considering it either. You're doing fine in your current job, you're living within your means, and you don't need to take big risks to chase hypothetical success. The phrase doing fine was particularly stinging. In Marcus's mind, I was doing fine in my modest career and didn't need or deserve the kind of success that would come with business ownership and partnership-level income. My conversation with my sister Lily, however, was completely different in tone and content. "Oh my God, Sophia, this sounds amazing," she said immediately after I explained the opportunity. "I'm so excited that someone finally recognized your talent and wants you as a partner. You're such an incredible designer, and you've been undervalued at that marketing firm for way too long." Her enthusiasm and confidence in my abilities was the complete opposite of Marcus's skepticism and condescension. She immediately assumed that the opportunity was legitimate, that I had done appropriate research, and that I deserved the success that would come with partnership. "I wish I could help you with the money," she continued, "but you know my financial situation. Between student loans and my teacher's salary, I'm barely keeping my head above water. But maybe I could help in other ways? I could co-sign something if that would help, or maybe ask around to see if any of my friends have investment experience." The difference between her response and Marcus's was striking. Despite having significantly less money and financial resources, Lily was immediately looking for ways to help rather than reasons why the opportunity was problematic. She trusted my judgment, celebrated my potential success, and wanted to contribute however she could. "Lily, I wouldn't ask you to co-sign anything given your own financial obligations," I said. "But thank you so much for being excited about this. It means a lot to have someone believe in me." "Are you kidding? Of course I believe in you. You're one of the most talented and hardworking people I know. If these partners want you, they obviously recognize what I've always known about your abilities." The conversation with Lily revealed not just her generous spirit but also her genuine love and pride in my accomplishments. Unlike Marcus, who saw my success as risky and unnecessary, Lily saw it as overdue recognition of talents she had always believed in. But the most surprising response came from my parents when they called me back 3 days later with their decision. "Sophia, your father and I have been talking about your business opportunity," Mom began, "and we've decided we want to help you." I was genuinely surprised, given their initial hesitancy and practical concerns. "We don't have $15,000 in liquid savings," Dad continued, "but we could take out a home equity line of credit to provide the money you need. It would mean taking on debt against our house, but we believe in your abilities and we think this opportunity could be wonderful for your future." The willingness to risk their home equity for my business opportunity was both touching and shocking. My parents, who had always been conservative with money and cautious about debt, were prepared to take significant financial risk to support my career goals. "We have 2 conditions," Mom added. "First, we want to meet with these partners before we finalize anything, just to satisfy ourselves that this is legitimate. Second, if the business doesn't work out, we want a written agreement about how the loan will be repaid." Their conditions were reasonable and demonstrated the kind of supportive caution that protected both their interests and mine. They were willing to help but wanted appropriate safeguards, and they were prepared to take financial risk while also being responsible about managing that risk. The contrast between my family members' responses was already revealing patterns I hadn't expected. Marcus, who was most able to help financially, was most resistant and condescending. Lily, who was least able to help financially, was most enthusiastic and supportive. My parents, who would face the most risk by helping, were ultimately the most willing to make sacrifices for my success. But these were just the responses from my immediate family. The real revelations would come from extended family members, whose responses would be less predictable and potentially more honest about their true feelings toward me. The responses from my extended family members revealed layers of family dynamics and character that I had never fully understood, and some of the results were so shocking that they fundamentally changed how I viewed relationships I had taken for granted my entire life. My first call was to my Aunt Margaret, my mother's sister, who had always positioned herself as the successful member of the family. She lived in an expensive house, drove luxury cars, and frequently made comments about her financial achievements and investment savvy. "Aunt Margaret, I hope you have a few minutes to talk. I have something important I need to discuss with you," I began, using the same respectful tone I had always used with her. "Of course, dear," she replied, though I could hear distraction in her voice that suggested she was multitasking during our conversation. I explained the business partnership opportunity with the same level of detail I had provided to my immediate family, emphasizing the career potential and the tight timeline for securing the investment. "Well, Sophia," she said when I finished, "this certainly sounds like an interesting opportunity, but I have to say, I'm a bit surprised that you're calling family members asking for money." The immediate judgment in her tone was unexpected and hurtful. She wasn't expressing concern about the investment or asking questions about the opportunity, she was criticizing me for asking for help in the first place. "I've always believed that young people should build their success through their own efforts rather than relying on family handouts," she continued. "When I started my business, I didn't ask anyone for help. I bootstrapped everything through hard work and determination." The lecture about self-reliance was particularly ironic coming from someone who had inherited a substantial amount of money from my grandfather and had used that inheritance as the foundation for her business investments. But more importantly, her response revealed that she viewed my request not as an opportunity to support family but as evidence of my personal failure to achieve success independently. "I understand your perspective, Aunt Margaret," I replied carefully. "I wasn't asking for a handout. I was asking about investment in a business opportunity that could benefit everyone involved if it's successful. Sophia, dear, if this opportunity were as good as you say it is, banks would be lining up to provide financing. The fact that you're asking family for money suggests that professional lenders have already evaluated this situation and found it lacking." Her dismissal was complete and condescending, delivered with the kind of superior tone that made it clear she viewed my business judgment as fundamentally flawed. I need to pause here because what happened with my next family member is absolutely incredible and shows exactly why this test was so revealing. You're probably starting to see the patterns emerging, some family members showing their true generosity while others reveal their selfishness, but what happened next completely shocked me and shows how money really does reveal people's character. Make sure you're subscribed because the contrast between family members is about to get even more dramatic. My Uncle Robert, Dad's younger brother, had a completely different response that caught me off guard in the best possible way. "Sophie," he said enthusiastically when I called him the next day. "It's so great to hear from you. What's going on?" I explained the same business opportunity, the investment requirement, and the timeline, expecting another cautious or skeptical response based on the pattern I'd been experiencing. "25,000, huh?" he said thoughtfully. "That's a significant chunk of money, but it sounds like a really exciting opportunity. Tell me more about these partners and what they're planning." His questions were curious rather than skeptical, focused on understanding the opportunity rather than finding reasons to dismiss it. He asked about my role in the partnership, the growth projections for the business, and the specific ways my skills would contribute to the company's success. "You know what, Sophie? I think you should go for this. You're incredibly talented, you've always had great business instincts, and this sounds like exactly the kind of opportunity that could really launch your career." I was so surprised by his enthusiasm that I almost forgot to ask for his help with the financing. "Oh, right," I said, laughing nervously. "I was hoping you might be able to help me with part of the investment, or maybe co-sign a loan, or help me think through other financing options." "I can do better than that," Uncle Robert replied immediately. "I can write you a check for the full 25,000. Consider it an investment in my favorite niece's future success." The offer was so generous and immediate that I was genuinely speechless for several seconds. "Uncle Robert, that's incredibly generous, but I can't accept that kind of gift. It's too much money, and I know you have your own financial obligations." "Sophie, it's not a gift, it's an investment. If the business is successful, you can pay me back with reasonable interest. If it's not successful, we'll figure something out. But either way, I want to see you succeed, and I have confidence in your abilities. His willingness to risk $25,000 on my potential success, with minimal questions and maximum enthusiasm, was the opposite of every other response I had received. He saw my opportunity as exciting rather than risky, viewed my request as reasonable rather than inappropriate, and wanted to contribute to my success rather than protect himself from potential loss. The contrast between Aunt Margaret's condescending dismissal and Uncle Robert's generous enthusiasm revealed fundamental differences in their characters and their feelings toward me that I had never recognized before. But the most shocking response came from my cousin Derek, Aunt Margaret's son, who I reached the following week. Derek had always been competitive with me throughout our childhood and young adulthood, frequently making comments about his achievements and comparing his success to mine in ways that suggested he viewed our relationship as a zero-sum game where his wins required my losses. "So you're asking family for money now," he said immediately after I explained the situation. "That's interesting, Sophie. I didn't realize your career was struggling that badly." The assumption that asking for investment meant my career was struggling revealed his immediate inclination to interpret my situation in the most negative possible way. "Derek, I'm not struggling, I'm asking for help pursuing a growth opportunity that could significantly advance my career," I corrected. Right, he said dismissively. "Look, Sophie, I'm sure this opportunity seems exciting to you, but I've seen a lot of these partnership deals in my business, and most of them are scams designed to separate ambitious people from their money." His air quotes around opportunity and his assumption that I couldn't recognize a legitimate business prospect revealed his fundamental lack of respect for my professional judgment and business acumen. But then Derek said something that completely exposed his true character and motivations. "Even if this were legitimate, which I doubt, I wouldn't be comfortable helping you succeed beyond your current level. You've always been the family favorite, always gotten praise for achievements that weren't that impressive, and honestly, I think you've already gotten more recognition than you deserve." The honesty was shocking and hurtful, but also illuminating. Derek wasn't just unwilling to help, he was actively opposed to my success because he viewed it as threatening to his own status within the family hierarchy. "I've worked hard to build my position in this family and my career," he continued, "and I'm not interested in funding competition from someone who's already gotten advantages I never had." His response revealed jealousy and resentment I had never suspected, along with a fundamentally competitive view of our relationship that made my success his loss in his mind. The conversation ended awkwardly, with Derek declining to help and making it clear that he viewed my request as evidence of both poor judgment and undeserved ambition. As I continued my calls to extended family members, the pattern of responses became increasingly clear and disturbing. The family members I had expected to be most helpful, those with more money and resources, were often the most dismissive and judgmental. Meanwhile, family members who had less to give were more generous with their emotional support and creative problem-solving. My cousin Lisa, who was a social worker making barely enough to cover her own expenses, spent an hour on the phone brainstorming ways I could raise the money through crowdfunding, small business grants, and community investment programs. She couldn't offer financial help, but she researched options and sent me detailed emails with links to resources I might not have considered. "Sophie, I'm so excited about this opportunity for you," she wrote in a follow-up email. "I've been telling everyone I know about your graphic design skills, and I think this partnership could be the breakthrough you've been working toward. I wish I could help financially, but I'm committed to supporting you however else I can." Her enthusiasm and practical assistance were worth more than money in terms of revealing her character and genuine care for my success. My Uncle James, Dad's older brother, had a response that was both disappointing and revealing. James was comfortable financially, owned his own construction business, and had always presented himself as someone who valued family loyalty and mutual support. "Sophie, I understand you're excited about this opportunity," he said after I explained the situation, "but I have to be honest, I don't think it's appropriate for you to be asking family members for this kind of money." His response was similar to Aunt Margaret's, focusing on the appropriateness of my request rather than the merits of the opportunity or his willingness to help. "When I started my business, I saved up the money myself and took out bank loans based on my own creditworthiness. I think you should do the same rather than trying to get family members to subsidize your business ventures. The word subsidize was particularly stinging, suggesting that any family assistance would be charity rather than investment in a legitimate opportunity. But Uncle James, I said, you've told stories about how Grandpa helped you get started by co-signing your first equipment loans and providing contacts in the industry. Didn't you benefit from family support when you were building your business? The silence that followed was long and uncomfortable, clearly indicating that he had forgotten about the family assistance he had received or didn't see it as comparable to what I was requesting. That was different, he finally said. Grandpa knew the construction industry and could evaluate the risks appropriately. This partnership opportunity you're describing is outside my area of expertise, so I can't make informed decisions about whether it's a good investment. His excuse was transparently self-serving, designed to justify his unwillingness to help while maintaining his self-image as a supportive family member. But the most heartbreaking response came from my grandmother, my mother's mother, who was living on a fixed income and had very limited financial resources. "Oh, sweetie," she said when I called her, "this sounds like such a wonderful opportunity for you. I'm so proud that other people are recognizing your talents and wanting you as their partner." Her immediate pride and excitement were exactly what I had hoped to hear from family members who cared about me, but her response also broke my heart because I knew she couldn't afford to help financially. "Grandma, I wasn't calling to ask you for money," I said quickly. "I know you're on a fixed income, and I would never put you in a difficult financial position." "Oh, honey, I know you wouldn't ask if you weren't desperate," she replied, misunderstanding my motivation but revealing her willingness to help despite her limited means. "I don't have $25,000, but I have about $3,000 in my savings account that I was keeping for emergencies. If that would help get you started, you're welcome to it." The offer of her emergency savings, money she couldn't afford to lose, was both the most generous and most heartbreaking response I received. Here was a woman living on Social Security who was willing to risk her financial security to help me pursue an opportunity, while family members with substantial incomes and assets were finding reasons to decline. "Grandma, I could never take your emergency fund," I said, genuinely emotional about her offer. "But thank you so much for being willing to help. It means more to me than you could know." "Sophie, dear, family helps family," she said simply. "If this opportunity is important to you, then it's important to me too." Her response revealed not just generosity but a fundamental belief in family loyalty and mutual support that many of my wealthier relatives apparently didn't share. The final call I made was to my Aunt Sarah, Mom's youngest sister, who had always been the most practical and direct member of our extended family. "Sophie, I'm going to be straight with you," she said after I explained the opportunity. "I don't have $25,000 to lend you, and I wouldn't feel comfortable co-signing a loan for that amount. But I think your request is completely reasonable, and I'm surprised that other family members aren't more supportive." Her honesty was refreshing after so many conversations filled with excuses and judgmental commentary. "If I were in your position, I would absolutely be asking family for help with this kind of opportunity," she continued. "That's what families are supposed to do, support each other's dreams and help each other succeed. The fact that you're getting pushback says more about them than it does about you." She couldn't help financially, but her validation of my approach and her criticism of other family members' responses was exactly the kind of support I needed to hear. "What I can do," she offered, "is help you think through other strategies. Have you considered asking several family members for smaller amounts rather than asking one person for the full $25,000? Sometimes people are more comfortable with smaller requests, even if the total adds up to the same amount." Her practical advice and emotional support were valuable in ways that went beyond financial assistance, and her response confirmed my growing understanding that generosity of spirit was often inversely related to financial capacity among my family members. As I completed my survey of family responses, the patterns were clear and troubling. The family members with the most money were the most resistant to helping, often justifying their unwillingness with lectures about self-reliance that ignored their own histories of receiving family assistance. Meanwhile, family members with the least money were the most generous with their emotional support, practical advice, and willingness to help however they could. After completing my calls to 15 family members over the course of 6 weeks, I had accumulated a comprehensive understanding of my family's true character that was both enlightening and heartbreaking. The test had revealed fundamental differences in values, priorities, and genuine care that I had never recognized during ordinary family interactions. The statistical breakdown was stark. Of the 6 family members who had significant financial resources, only one, Uncle Robert, had offered meaningful help. Of the 9 family members with modest or limited finances, 7 had offered emotional support, practical assistance, or creative problem-solving, and 2, including my grandmother, had offered money they couldn't afford to lose. But the numbers only told part of the story. The qualitative differences in responses revealed character traits and relationship dynamics that completely changed my understanding of my place in the family hierarchy. Family members like Aunt Margaret and Cousin Derek hadn't just declined to help, they had been actively judgmental and dismissive, suggesting that my request was inappropriate and my business judgment was flawed. Their responses revealed underlying resentment and competitiveness that had been hidden beneath surface-level family politeness for years. Meanwhile, family members like Lily, Lisa, and my grandmother had immediately assumed my competence, celebrated my opportunity, and looked for ways to contribute despite their limited resources. Their responses revealed genuine love, pride, and investment in my success that went far beyond obligation or duty. The test had also exposed the hypocrisy of family members who preached about self-reliance while conveniently forgetting the assistance they had received when starting their own careers and businesses. Uncle James's lectures about earning success independently while ignoring his own history of family support were typical of several family members who seemed to have selective memories about their own paths to success. Most revealing were the different assumptions family members made about my motivations and character. Some immediately assumed I was desperate, irresponsible, or naive. Others immediately assumed I was competent, ambitious, and deserving of support. These assumptions revealed their fundamental beliefs about who I was and what I deserved, beliefs that had apparently been influencing our relationships all along without my awareness. As I analyzed the results of my test, I realized that I now had perfect clarity about how to handle my lottery windfall and its impact on my family relationships. The responses to my fake crisis had created a clear roadmap for determining who deserved to benefit from my good fortune and who had revealed character flaws that disqualified them from my generosity. But before making any final decisions, I wanted to conduct one more test that would provide additional information about family members' values and priorities. I decided to call back the family members who had offered help and ask them to meet me in person to discuss the details of the business opportunity. This would give me a chance to observe their behavior when they thought they were making real financial commitments, and it would provide opportunities for them to back out gracefully if their initial offers had been more generous than their actual comfort levels. Uncle Robert was the first person I called back, and his response was immediately reassuring. "Of course I want to meet and discuss the details," he said enthusiastically. "I'm excited to learn more about the partnership and understand how I can best support your success. When and where would be convenient for you?" His continued enthusiasm and willingness to invest time in understanding the opportunity confirmed that his initial offer had been genuine and well-considered rather than impulsive or superficial. My parents were equally committed to following through on their offer to help with a home equity loan. "We've already spoken with our bank about the home equity line of credit," Dad told me when I called to schedule a meeting. "We want to understand all the details of the partnership so we can structure our assistance in a way that protects everyone involved." Their practical approach and financial commitment demonstrated that they had seriously considered the risks and benefits before making their initial offer. But the most touching response came from my grandmother when I called to thank her again for her generous offer. "Sophie, dear, I've been thinking about our conversation," she said, "and I want you to know that I'm prepared to give you that money even if other family members aren't helping. I believe in you, and I think you deserve every opportunity to succeed." Her continued commitment to helping, despite her limited resources and the potential financial risk, was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. She was willing to sacrifice her own security for my success, while wealthier family members had found excuses to protect their comfortable lifestyles. The contrast crystallized my understanding of who my family members really were when their character was tested. Money hadn't corrupted anyone, it had simply revealed corruption that already existed, just as it had revealed generosity and love that had been present but less visible during ordinary times. 2 days later, I made the decision to end the experiment and begin the process of revealing the truth to my family members. But I wouldn't tell everyone at once, and I wouldn't treat everyone the same way. The responses to my test had earned different family members very different relationships with my lottery fortune. I started by calling Uncle Robert and asking him to meet me at a nice restaurant for what I described as a business dinner to discuss the partnership opportunity. "Robert," I said after we had ordered drinks and settled into a private corner booth, "I need to tell you something important about the business opportunity one described." His expression grew concerned, apparently worried that I was about to deliver bad news about the partnership or ask for more money than I had initially requested. "The truth is," I continued, "there is no business opportunity. There are no partners waiting for my investment, and there is no $25,000 deadline." The confusion on his face was immediate and obvious. I created that scenario to test how my family members would respond if I needed help with an important opportunity. I wanted to understand who really cared about my success and who would be willing to make sacrifices to help me achieve my goals. Uncle Robert sat back in his chair, processing what I had told him, and I could see him working through the implications of my deception. "Sophie, I have to admit, I'm a little confused about why you felt you needed to test your family's loyalty," he said carefully. "But I'm glad you trusted me enough to include me in whatever experiment you were conducting." "I tested everyone because I recently came into some money, and I wanted to understand who my family members really were before that money changed our relationships," I explained. "How much money are we talking about?" he asked. $47 million. I won the lottery 8 months ago." The silence that followed was profound as Uncle Robert absorbed the magnitude of what I had told him. I watched his expression cycle through disbelief, shock, understanding, and finally, a kind of amazed pride. "Sophie, that's incredible," he said finally. "Congratulations on your good fortune, and congratulations on having the wisdom to test people's character before revealing it." His response was exactly what I had hoped for: excitement about my good fortune, respect for my approach to managing it, and no immediate requests or suggestions about how I should use the money. "I'm honored that I passed your test," he continued with a smile. "Though I have to say, offering $25,000 to someone who already has $47 million is probably the most expensive character reference I'll ever provide." His humor and grace in handling the revelation confirmed everything his initial response had suggested about his character and values. "Robert, your willingness to help me when you thought I needed it means more than I can express," I said. "I want to show my appreciation in ways that will make a real difference in your life." Over the next 2 hours, we discussed ways I could support his own business goals, his children's education expenses, and his long-term financial security. By the end of the evening, I had committed to investments and gifts that would significantly improve his family's quality of life while respecting his independence and dignity. My next revelation was to my parents, who I invited to dinner at their favorite restaurant under the pretense of discussing the partnership opportunity in more detail. "Mom, Dad, like I told Robert, there is no business partnership," I began after explaining the true nature of my test. "But there is $47 million that I won in the lottery 8 months ago." Their reaction was even more dramatic than Robert's had been. Mom actually gasped audibly, and Dad's wine glass stopped halfway to his mouth as he processed what I had said. "Sophie, are you serious?" Mom asked. "You won the lottery and didn't tell us?" "I wanted to understand who you were as people and as parents before money entered the equation and potentially changed our relationships," I explained. "Dad was the first to understand the implications of my approach, so when we offered to take out a home equity loan to help you, you were testing whether we would make sacrifices for your success." "That's exactly right. And you passed the test beautifully. You were willing to risk your own financial security to support my career goals, and that tells me everything I need to know about your love and faith in me." The conversation that followed was emotional and transformative. My parents expressed pride in my good fortune, respect for my thoughtful approach to managing it, and gratitude that they had demonstrated their love in ways that earned them a place in my new financial reality. By the end of the evening, I had committed to paying off their mortgage, establishing education funds for any future grandchildren, and ensuring their comfortable retirement regardless of their own savings and Social Security benefits. But the most emotional conversation was with my grandmother, who I visited at her apartment the next weekend. "Grandma, I need to tell you about the business opportunity one mentioned," I began, settling into the familiar chair beside her kitchen table where we had shared countless conversations over the years. After explaining the test and revealing my lottery win, I watched her process the information with the same grace and wisdom she had always demonstrated. "Oh, my dear child," she said, reaching across the table to hold my hand. "I'm so proud of you for thinking so carefully about how to handle such a blessing. And I'm glad that my willingness to help you showed you how much I believe in your potential. Grandma, your offer to give me your emergency savings when you thought I needed help was the most generous and selfless thing anyone did during my entire test," I told her. "I want to make sure you never have to worry about money again." The gift I arranged for my grandmother was comprehensive and permanent, a trust fund that would cover all her living expenses, medical care, and personal needs for the rest of her life, plus additional funds she could use to help other family members or causes she cared about. But I wasn't finished with my revelations. The family members who had failed my test also needed to understand what their responses had revealed and what consequences their character flaws would have for their relationship with my fortune. The conversations with family members who had failed my character test were more difficult but equally important for establishing the boundaries that would protect my fortune and my emotional well-being from people who had revealed problematic values and priorities. My first call was to Aunt Margaret, who had been so dismissive and condescending during my initial request for help. "Aunt Margaret, I wanted to follow up on our conversation about the business opportunity one mentioned," I began, using the same respectful tone I had always used with her despite knowing what her response would be. "Oh, Sophie, I hope you've reconsidered that risky investment," she replied immediately. "I've been thinking about our conversation, and I'm even more convinced that you should focus on building your career through traditional means rather than chasing get-rich-quick schemes." Her continued condescension and assumption that I couldn't make good financial decisions provided the perfect setup for my revelation. "Actually, Aunt Margaret, there was no business opportunity. I created that scenario to test how family members would respond if I needed help with an important financial goal." The silence that followed was telling, and I could hear her shifting uncomfortably as she began to understand the implications of what I was saying. "I conducted this test because I recently won $47 million in the lottery, and I wanted to understand my family members' true character before that money influenced our relationships." "You won the lottery?" she asked, her voice immediately changing to a tone I had never heard from her before, eager, calculating, and suddenly very interested in being helpful. "I did. And your response to my test revealed everything I needed to know about your values and your feelings toward me," I continued calmly. "Sophie, you have to understand, I was just trying to protect you from making a bad financial decision," she said quickly, already attempting to rewrite the narrative of our previous conversation. "Aunt Margaret, you weren't trying to protect me. You were lecturing me about self-reliance while conveniently forgetting the inheritance from Grandpa that funded your own business ventures. You were dismissive of my judgment and condescending about my request for help." The accuracy of my assessment was confirmed by her defensive response, "That's not fair, Sophie. I was just being practical and realistic about the risks involved in partnership investments. The risks you were concerned about weren't financial, they were the risks of treating me like an equal rather than maintaining your position as the family's financial expert and success story," I replied. The conversation continued for several more uncomfortable minutes, during which Aunt Margaret alternated between defensive justifications and increasingly transparent attempts to repair our relationship now that she knew about my lottery win. "Sophie, maybe I could help you manage some of your investments," she suggested. "I have a lot of experience with financial planning and wealth management." Her immediate offer to help manage my money, after refusing to help me when she thought I needed it, was exactly the kind of response I had expected and prepared for. Aunt Margaret, I appreciate your offer, but I've already established relationships with financial advisors who demonstrated their integrity before they knew about my lottery win. I won't be needing assistance from family members who failed to show integrity during my character test. The finality in my tone made it clear that our relationship had been permanently altered by her response to my test, and that her access to my fortune would be limited accordingly. My conversation with cousin Derek was even more direct and satisfying. Derek, I wanted to thank you for your honesty during our conversation about my business opportunity, I began. What do you mean? He asked, clearly uncertain about where the conversation was heading. You were very clear about your feelings toward me and your opposition to my success. You said you thought I had already gotten more recognition than I deserved, and you wouldn't be comfortable helping me succeed beyond my current level. Sophie, I think you misunderstood what I was trying to say, he began, but I interrupted before he could start rewriting history. Derek, there was no business opportunity. I created that scenario to test family members' character because I won $47 million in the lottery and wanted to understand who people really were before money influenced our relationships. The silence was so profound that I wondered if the call had been disconnected. You won the lottery? He finally asked, his voice tight with what sounded like panic. I did. And your response revealed jealousy, resentment, and active opposition to my success that I had never recognized before. Thank you for that clarity. Sophie, you have to understand, he started, but I didn't let him finish. Derek, I understand perfectly. You view my success as threatening to your own status, you resent recognition I've received throughout our lives, and you're not interested in supporting my goals because you see them as competing with yours. The accusations were harsh but accurate, and his stammering attempts to deny them only confirmed their truth. The good news, I continued, is that you won't need to worry about competing with me anymore. My success is now at a level that's completely separate from family dynamics and rivalries. The bad news is that your character test revealed values that make you incompatible with the kind of generosity I'm showing to family members who demonstrated integrity. Derek's response was predictable, immediate backtracking, desperate attempts to reframe his previous comments, and increasingly transparent efforts to position himself as deserving of my newfound generosity. Sophie, I think there's been a misunderstanding, he said. I've always been proud of your achievements, and I would love to find ways to support your continued success. His complete reversal was pathetic but also illuminating about his character and values. He had been honest about his resentment when he thought I was struggling, but he was willing to lie about his feelings when he discovered I was wealthy. Derek, I appreciate your attempt to repair our relationship, but character tests only work if they reveal people's authentic values. You showed me who you really are, and I'm grateful for that honesty. The conversation ended with Derek understanding that his response to my test had eliminated his access to any benefits from my lottery fortune, and that his jealousy and competitiveness had cost him a relationship with the family member who was now in the best position to help everyone succeed. Looking back on this incredible journey of testing my family's character, I realized that winning the lottery was only the beginning of my good fortune. The real prize was discovering who my family members truly were beneath the surface of ordinary relationships. Some people revealed generosity, love, and integrity that earned them places in my new life. Others revealed selfishness, judgment, and resentment that disqualified them from my trust and support. Have you ever wondered how your family members would react if you suddenly needed help or came into money? Do you think money reveals character or corrupts it? I'd love to hear your thoughts about family loyalty and how financial situations test relationships. Share your stories in the comments. Sometimes these experiences help us understand that we're not alone in dealing with complicated family dynamics. If this story made you think about your own family relationships, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I share more stories about money, family dynamics, and the ways life-changing events reveal people's true character. Ring that notification bell so you don't miss any new videos, and share this with anyone who might be curious about how their own family would handle sudden wealth or crisis. Thank you for watching and for all the thoughtful comments you leave on these videos. Remember that true family isn't always about blood relations, It's about the people who show up for you when it matters, who celebrate your success without jealousy, and who demonstrate their love through actions rather than just words. Take care of yourselves, trust the people who prove they deserve your trust, and remember that you have the power to choose who gets to benefit from your success and happiness. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, keep building relationships with people who see your worth and want to support your dreams.